Welcome to Millennials Meet Liberty, your source for sharing hot libertarian takes on the world's weekly headlines. Here's your host, Colt Thompson.
Hey everybody, Colt Thompson here with our 5th episode of Millennials Meet Liberty. Today I wanted to speak on one particular topic, and that was the debate that unfolded last night at Otterbein College in Columbus, Ohio. This was the Democratic debate for president, profiling 12 candidates who are looking to rise to the top of the Democratic ticket to take on Donald Trump and Mike Pence in the impending election, which is probably about 12 full months away, as we are in October of 2019. So, Otterbein College, I don't know a ton about it. I know it's a small liberal arts school in Columbus, Ohio. I currently live in Ohio, but I know that the tickets were hard to come by because I tried to get in. So yes, as a libertarian and a right-leaning individual in general, I wanted to find a way to get in there and potentially ask a question, but of course that did not happen as I was crowded out by other favorites. That being said, I had one pseudo horse in the race, and that was Tulsi Gabbard. Anyone who looks at her politics as it pertains to foreign policy would recognize and understand that she is a bastion of freedom and non-aggression when it comes to foreign policy. In particular, our misdealings in the Middle East and ways to finagle ourselves out of that mess. She's just more or less a rock star and really saying the right thing and calling out the media for all of their shenanigans. Outside of that, though, I didn't really have anyone that I particularly cared about in the race. I kind of know some of these cookie cutter, boilerplate slogans and ideals that these people put forward and just how awful they ultimately will be if one of them assumes power and can take advantage of the turmoil and economic strife here in the heartland of the United States, where people are not as well off as the media pretends like they are and portrays them to be. So this debate, I knew going into it was going to be, in my eyes, a shit show, just a lot of peddling of free programs and free stuff and just ideas that are not benefiting anybody in the United States and are not grounded in the ideals that this country was founded on. So I'm not even going to say it was frustrating because I knew all of this going into it. So call me a cynic. I just wanted to view some of this and maybe get a few cheap laughs and have some good insight for you guys from the libertarian angle of what these guys are truly putting out there and what it means for us if they were ever to be able to carry out these insane ideas. So again, I was pulling for Tulsi a little bit, but I know going into it, she had to essentially say that she was going to boycott this debate had she not been invited. So I think she was the 12th out of 12 people to end up on that debate stage. For obvious reasons, the media hates people who are anti-war. The media is part of the war party. And as you listen to my podcast, you'll come to understand why. Really, the left and the right have devolved into one party, and that's the war party. And Tulsi represents a change and a breath of fresh air from that, especially coming from the left, who are people who at one point in time used to identify as anti-war and pro-civil liberties, but who really know where they lost their way. So of the 12 people up there, I'm just going to bounce around a little bit. What I missed was the opening statements, and I also missed the closing statements. But I got more or less the meat and potatoes of what was going on in between. That's just how it fell for me. I was live streaming it on Facebook and watching it piecemeal where I could. Because like I said, I kind of know all the pandering and platitudes that were going to be put forth by the Democrats as it was. And what I saw really just verified everything that I already knew, but at least it provided to me some sort of entertainment. Now, entertainment's a loose word. It was nothing like the Republican debates for the primaries 5 years ago, when Donald Trump was just bopping everybody on the head, from Jeb Bush to Marco Rubio to Rand Paul, who's one of my personal favorite politicians out there. It was just a really entertaining, funny scene, and Donald Trump is forceful, and that's what the American people want. They want someone who's forceful as a leader to carry out whatever the democratically elected mission is of that given election cycle. So this debate, I wouldn't call it a snooze fest because I'm a nerd and I'm interested in politics, but it didn't provide for many one-liners or super funny moments. Again, this is a debate, and I guess it's not meant to be funny, but with these people, you cannot help yourself but laugh at the utter inanity that's spewed from these people's mouth, most of which is just immoral, stupid, economically illiterate, and stuff that's been put forth to the American public for decades and decades and centuries, and for really just since the beginning of time in politics has ever existed in this country. So Tulsi, I'll just start with her because I like her. She got in a few really solid moments where she was able to directly call out the New York Times and directly call out CNN at the same time, who were the dual hosts of this event, on how she was smeared and slandered and mischaracterized on her positions with the withdrawal of the troops from Syria in the past couple weeks. She flat out mentioned how they were liars and propaganda artists, and she was very, very calm, cool, and collected and drove home her point, to which the moderators didn't want to hear any of that, I'm sure. But I'm glad she put it out there. And then an interesting route she took with her debate is that she ended up wearing white while all of the 11 other people were wearing black. And Tulsi also identified herself as the truly anti-war person and came directly at others. She would definitely try to be the tip of the spear when it came to the front runners, Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, and ask them questions directly about war and what their opinions were on these things. Probably not a move I would have done. I probably would have just answered the questions head on, and I got caught in trying to instigate something with others on stage. But when you're scrapping to get into a debate in general, you're going to be scrapping to gain relevancy. And that's exactly what she was doing. She's a fighter. So she knocked it out of the park with saying the withdrawal from Syria and the withdrawal from the Middle East is what we need to do, because we truly do need to do that over decades of this monstrosity. The way I look at it, I frame it as, the United States is a dagger that was driven into the Middle East for whatever reason. And in order for us to come out of there, we're going to have to pull the dagger out, and there's going to be some bloodshed. More awful things will happen. But it's better than driving the dagger even further and ultimately killing the human or Middle East in this example. So we created this giant mess, the warmongers, the warhawks, the Lindsey Grahams, the John McCains, the left, the right, the Hillary Clintons, all of these people, the mainstream media foisting upon us this false narrative of all of them hating us in the Middle East because of our freedoms, which is not the case. It's because of all of the shenanigans and commotions we've caused in the areas of the world that once were the kingpins of oil, but now are not. Hence the United States reliance dropping on Middle Eastern oil due to our increase in natural gas and oil supply here in the United States, which is really just a boon for our economy and good for our sole independence in the energy sector. So Tulsi had those couple moments of being anti-war and mentioning how she was a soldier and had been in the National Guard in Hawaii for 14 years and just reflecting on those times and instilling, at least trying to put forth the point to the public that she could be the commander-in-chief because she knows what it's like being in the military and knows what we need to do with these foreign engagements. And yeah, I can buy that, but that's not going to win over a crowd of corporatists and mainstream people. And that's not the narrative the public has been force-fed forever, and it's just going to come off as bitter-tasting medicine because it's not normal and it's not part of the regime. And she's just up there standing and telling the truth as it pertains to foreign policy, and I'm cool with that. I think that takes a certain amount of guts, and I really admire and respect her doing that. So she never got to speak about economics at all, and that's fine because she really has no idea what she's talking about, the econ, and that goes for every other person on stage. So at least she was unique with foreign policy. Just bouncing around, thinking about other people who were up there. I think Andrew Yang and his devout Yang gang who propelled him to the stage. I think he was invoked in numerous questions involving the aspect of technology and big tech firms and their runaway, do whatever they want nature as it pertains to policy online, and who's censored and who's deplatformed, and just anything to do with big tech in general, because I think he's perceived as the tech guy, the futuristic guy, the intelligent guy. I think he's just perceived as one of these people who knows a lot about these industries. Perhaps he's more of an academic, while a businessman, than more of the people on stage. And he's also younger. So it's just weird. He basically said a lot of what other people said about the big tech companies. He just acts like they're monopolies. They need to be dealt with, and hardy har har, we're going to show up at 21st century solutions and really tackle these monopolists and really come in there and crack some skulls and make sure they're being fair, whatever that means. I mean, these people are speaking in vague generalities because what's going on with big tech is not a product truly of the free market. I mean, President Barack Obama met with Google, I believe, every week in the Silicon Valley, or at least over the phone, just kind of going over what they do and their algorithms and their processes and how news hits the market. I mean, these big tech companies are, by and large, they are the tip of the spear for the liberal agenda in the United States. I mean, the people getting deplatformed are the Alex Jones and the quote-unquote crazies. I mean, he's pretty crazy, but the quote-unquote crazies and the Owen Benjamins and the comedians who are right of center and anyone pushing free markets and anti-government and anti-war, they're the ones who are being deplatformed and treated poorly. But the libertarian answer to a lot of this technically is kind of lazy. It's that these companies are free market, free enterprise, private companies where they can do whatever they want. But like just looking a little bit beyond that, they are just sock puppets for the liberal media. They just are. That's exactly what they are. So I don't know like what the main problem is with these companies in the eyes of leftists is. I think maybe it's something to do with like electioneering of results in the elections and what propaganda and air quotes is put out to the public. But if you look in any news feed and you've looked over the past 10 years, I mean, the bias of liberals dominating the airwaves and social media and videos and viewership, I mean, they just dominate everything. So, I mean, their agenda is being pushed harder than anything. Silicon Valley was a lot more into rigging elections than that of the Russians. I mean, that's pretty clear if you want to talk about big tech and social media. So the companies are huge, and there's really nothing wrong with that. I mean, if they're buying favors or being granted privilege by the federal government, therein lies the problem. And I mean, any monopolist usually gets cozy with the government to insulate themselves from competition by devising all these rules and regulations that they can only comply with. And that's exactly what's going to happen to the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Instagrams and all of those things. That's what's going to happen. They're going to get cozy with the Andrew Yangs of the world, the President Yang, and he's going to say, oh yeah, here's all these mountain of regulations you need to follow in order to really make everything more fair, which in general just means nobody else can afford the cost to comply. And then there will be fewer options for people to use as it pertains to big tech and social media companies, which that's the world Andrew Yang is going to live in if he's president, and he doesn't even realize or understand that. So the other part of this too is all these services are voluntary. I mean, if people don't like what Facebook's doing with their data, they can tell them to fuck off and just not even bother to log in or use the account at all. Or if their information is being sold, I think Yang went out to say your information is your property. I mean, you're basically renting property from Facebook when you log on there for free. I mean, they're controlling that platform. That's what you're doing. You didn't create Facebook. They gave you all the opportunities to spread your ideas and share what you want to share. It's not your property. It doesn't even make any sense. I mean, unless you have some crazy philosophical view on that, I don't understand. That literally is dead wrong. So just shut up about that. It makes no sense. I just don't get that. It's like me using like someone else's car, and because I'm using it, all of a sudden, like the stuff I'm saying and doing in the car, like, I don't know. It's just a really weird thing to say. But so Andrew Yang, I mean, you can dismiss him as the token Asian up there that they wanted to get on stage. He was young and futuristic. Nobody's going to care about him in the long run. He has his people that really are crazy about him, who don't understand economics and believe in his freedom dividend. But he never really even got into that as far as I was concerned, or could even tell from what I watched. So Andrew Yang, pretty much a nothing burger, made 0 cents. Tulsi Gabbard, excellent on war, excellent at calling out the media, and that's all the things she got to say. So she was the most correct on the entire stage in the eyes of a libertarian. Going a little bit further, I like to talk about Amy Klobuchar for a second. I didn't even know much about her, the Minnesotan who's hanging out in Congress up there. That's just what I really respected about her. I mean, nothing she said economically or from a policy standpoint made any sense, of course. I mean, it was pretty, it wasn't like very bold like a Liz Warren or Bernie Sanders. It was pretty like bland, vanilla, status quo type bullshit. So hence why she probably won't get anywhere. It's probably helping her stay the course because she's not too provocative, not too much of a provocateur to trigger some media people to write her off. She's just one of these people to fill a debate stage podium. But what I appreciated about her is that she kind of seemed a little more normal and down to earth and like a family person when she inserted a quip about her daughter, and this is more on a personal level than her grandfather. You could just tell she was a real human and she was relatable. And I don't know if she came from money. A lot of these people were brought up with a silver spoon in her mouth, but it didn't strike me as that, just listening to her talk. So that was pretty cool. But other than that, mostly a bunch of nothing burgers. No crazy economic fallacies like Andrew Yang, but nothing really with any teeth or anything that anyone who's a libertarian or anyone who cares about the country should really give a shit about. So Klobuchar, I guess, ho-hum, pretty funny. Yang, totally out of control, has no idea what he's talking about. And then Tulsi saying quite a few really good things as it pertains to war. I like how this gentleman, actually, before I talk about Steyer, the billionaire businessman who bought his way in last second, I do want to focus on Julian Castro for a second, whose twin brother, I think, was the mayor of San Antonio, and then he himself was the head of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. But with Julian, he kind of reminded me of Klobuchar, and that he seemed like he's pretty genuine, authentic, grew up a normal-ish life. And when I say normal, just like an everyday American where they actually had struggles and had to pay bills and had to make a few sacrifices to garner their accolades and, pave their way to the top. And I really respect him in that regard because I have a brother and I grew up in a middle-class family and I just know the grind. And I sense that he was an authentic person. Now, does he know what he's talking about? No, but he's authentic and he speaks his mind. And I think he's probably one of the more honest people up there. And that definitely was shown when he rebutted Mayor Pete Buttigieg, however you say that, saying that we did not need to pack the court. And I'll get into Pete's fallacy and stupidity on that in a minute, but it just seems like Julian pretty down to earth, kind of in the mold of Klobuchar, just kind of there to fill a podium, check a box, maybe of diversity and then the state of Texas. So I think he actually said a really good point about cops in California or just cops in general. They should not be given another reason to go into someone's home as it pertains to guns. That's a great talking point because that's exactly right. I mean, we don't want cops having another reason to assault someone's personal liberties. And Julian Castro knocked that out of the park. So I'll salute him for that. He didn't get a lot of time because he wasn't one of the big three up there or big four like Kamala, Bernie, Liz, and Joe Biden. But with his time, it seemed like it was pretty well spent and he reflected on the issues that he was asked about and he did an okay job. So Klobuchar and him, real humans. Chalk that up. I was going to get to Steyer or Buyer or whatever this guy's name was, Tom Steyer, the self-made billionaire. It almost seems like, and I think Cory Booker, much to his chagrin, saw Tom on stage because I think Tom hadn't campaigned much at all and wasn't even included in these previous debates because he hadn't even really ran for president until last second. And I think being a billionaire and spending tens of millions of dollars of your own money last second, that's a good way to get you on the debate stage. So obviously the polls and all of those things didn't matter at all. I mean, we all know that. They don't matter. It's just whatever the CNN and New York Times wanted on that debate stage. And that's exactly what they got in Steyer. And I think other than the money he's been throwing around to get name recognition and to get in that debate, I think what Democrats want is to show a capitalist who cares about shareholders and stakeholders, and that he is the anti-thesis to Donald Trump and his sleazy entrepreneurial capitalist mindset. So I think he was just there to be the anti-Donald Trump and to provide that voice that Democrats do, in fact, to have people who are successful in entrepreneurship and business. So I don't know. He had a lot of tough talk about climate change. It's just weird because if he really understood climate change, I think he would realize that the free market is the thing that drives us to find the innovations to really ward off significantly more climate change. And I mean, of course, he didn't mention that because he doesn't understand the issue, even though he claims to have worked in these fields with climate change for the last 10 years. I mean, I don't know how he missed that part. He kept talking about other countries and I don't know. He was kind of off the beaten path of that, I suppose. But again, kind of like Castro and Klobuchar, not him because he didn't seem as down to earth and more normal, but just kind of a nothing burger, kind of Mr. Irrelevant up there, probably will voluntarily leave the debates in the next few months after he realizes he spent too much money on a purposeless cause. And it's just really a voice nobody cares about. Nobody gives a shit about what he has to say. Hence why he had to buy his way on stage. So thinking about it too, Kamala Harris, referring to Donald Trump as dude and needing to ban his Twitter. I mean, that's about as anti-American as I've ever heard someone speak on the stage. You need to ban the president's Twitter. I'm not a democracy guy, but if you're going to elect a president and next thing you want to do is turn around and ban his Twitter account from him communicating to the public, I mean, that's the last thing we need. We need utter transparency from the Oval Office and government in general. It's everything we needs to be transparent in government. So the idea that you're going to ban his Twitter because you don't like a few of the things he said, I mean, just get the fuck out of here. That's just like such a blowhard, hardo move. Just come on. Like, that doesn't make any sense. How is that helping anyone? I mean, other than you being annoyed by what he says and how he has such a massive audience that's tapped into his every move because he is pretty hilarious and he's the commander in chief. So just grow up. You don't need to be the speech police on that and have Try to attempt to ban him from that platform. I mean, that's just nonsensical. That's just I want to fire up the base type comment. And then with her, it's always a woe is me. And I grew up black and I grew up a female and I've been prosecuting all of these crimes. I've seen a lot of dead corpses. I mean, okay, you can keep saying that all you want, Kamala, but at the end of the day, nobody cares, especially if you economically are totally unsound, you don't know what you're talking about, and you're just talking about all these like collectivist groups that really irks libertarians. How about you just refer to yourself as a human and talk about the issues instead of talking about yourself as all these different collective groups and talking about other collective groups and how we hate this president who's racist. I mean, you're just categorizing people, and that's your way to the tippy top. It's just not going to work. You need strong ideas and leadership, not just painting pictures and being disgruntled about somebody who might say a few offensive things. I don't know where she's going with any of this ever. It's always, I'm going to talk to Joe Biden about racism on stage. I mean, what are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish? It's not leadership. You're just going down rabbit holes of some little anecdotal story here and there. And I don't know. She just doesn't make any sense at all when she talks. She's kind of like a black Hillary Clinton, I guess, with a little more edge and swag. Maybe a little younger, perhaps a little more witty, but she just really doesn't do it for me. I mean, just talking tough and putting on a mean mug does not make you a leader. If anything, you're just being a poser and putting on a front for all these Americans because you're trying to prove you belong with the in crowd up there and belong on the stage. So she's really just a joke. I don't think she contributed anything of any value when she spoke at all. Like, nothing funny. Maybe the soundbite of that dude needs to get out of office or ban him from Twitter, but none of this is productive. I mean, this is a presidential debate. It's just dumb. So she's basically a loser. Bernie Sanders, Liz Warren, Joe Biden to round out some of the shenanigans. Actually, before I get to those big three, I do want to talk about Mayor Pete and Beto O'Rourke. So they got into it a few times, a couple little feuds they had, and it seems like this Mayor Pete guy, he's just one of these guys who's holier than thou, always talking about courage and morals and high ideals. And I just laugh because he gets into it with Beto O'Rourke, who's about the same, cut from the same cloth. Just they think they're morally superior to everybody. They're both basically children. They don't understand how the real world works. They have zero idea, but yet they have these credentials and they've accomplished something in the public sphere. So all of a sudden they know what they're talking about. They don't. It's just funny. So they're getting into it about gun control or what have you, immigration. I'm not even quite sure what it was, but at one point, Buttigieg, or however you say his name, Mayor Pete, talks about the Supreme Court and how he wants to pack the Supreme Court. And his reason for packing the Supreme Court is because he didn't want it to be political anymore. Well, by definition, the reason you're packing the Supreme Court is because you are, in fact, trying to make it political because you don't like the current amount of people on there or their views or the balance in which the views are swung. So he's literally contradicting himself all in one sentence. He's saying, well, what I would do is I would find maybe 5 people who shared the same values that I do. And then I'd find another 5 who are maybe Republicans. And then we get another 5 who are independent. Yeah, okay, just give me a break, man. Like, you're making no sense. That's all judicial activism. This just makes me laugh out loud. And I give props to Castro for just responding in kind and saying, look, we don't need 15 people on the Supreme Court. We can stick with 9. And that's exactly right. The reason you're trying to add more people, Mayor P, is because you want to politically change the Supreme Court to really get the ends that you desire in your utopian, fantasy, stupid world. And he's one of these guys who countered Tulsi too, because he likes to refer to himself as a military guy, for which he was, and talking about how we need to slowly exit and protect the Kurds. Well, guess what, Mayor Pete? People like you always show up. Maybe they're not gay, but they always show up and they say the same thing and they give X number of reasons why we can't live in the Middle East. Well, over the course of 10 or 20 years, this becomes more and more immoral of you to say that because more and more people keep dying. So get the blood off your fucking hands and grow up. You're literally a child up there talking about how righteous and moral you are, not wanting to withdraw troops in the Middle East, and then packing the court, openly saying you want to do that, and then pretending as if that's not a political stunt. It totally is. So that guy is a total joke. And then it's just so funny because he talks in such a serious tone and he's such a serious guy, but everything, all of his solutions are the furthest thing from serious. He's the guy who didn't fire the cop who I think shot and killed someone in South Bend, the city for which he presides over mayor. I don't even know exactly what happened, but whatever it was, he should have fired the cop and he didn't. So the idea of this guy has any balls to do anything right is a joke. And then again, he was sparring with Beto O'Rourke, who's a huge phony. I like to laugh about Ted Cruz in Texas, who is Hispanic and refers to himself as Ted. His real name is Raphael, whereas Beto's real name is Robert. So when you look at those two, we got a white guy pretending to be Hispanic and a Hispanic guy pretending to be white. And they both are in the parties that prefer those types of people. So of course, Robert, the Hispanic, is in the Democratic Party here. And he made so many gaffes in the media and so many inane, stupid comments about guns and gun ownership and gun confiscation over the past few weeks that you would think he would come to the debate prepared to respond to those remarks and defend them vigorously. And all he kept saying about how he would enforce his mandatory gun program, buyback program, whatever it is, that people would just follow the law and that he would expect the morals of the Americans to just follow the law. And he admitted there was no way to know if anyone had these guns. But I mean, what world are you living in that you think you're just everyone's going to voluntarily turn in their firearms because there's a law in the books to do that? Yeah, get real, buddy. That's a dream. And I wish he would have at least explained himself to the extent where he had an idea of how these people turn in their guns or how they'd be confiscated. It was just nothing. He literally had no answers. He was speechless. I think it was the Mayor Pete guy who was a fool, called him out for his tomfoolery. I mean, it's bizarre. How do you go up there with no answers for something that you care so much about, according to your quotes, that we're just going to come right in and take people's guns? Yeah, give me a break. So I love people like Beto O'Rourke and Mayor Pete with their whole I'm holier than thou act, which again, before I guess I get to the holy trinity there, the triumvirate, Bernie, Biden, and Sanders, it makes me think of Cory Booker, who was up there. I keep leaving people off because there was 12 people, but Cory Booker might be the ultimate I am holier than thou person, always projecting these platitudes of Martin Luther King and how we need to hold each other up and love each other and pull each other up by our bootstraps. This is just how this guy talks. He talks as if he's a preacher, and he's not going to be president. When you're bald and you're on stage, you're not going to be president. It's not a shot of bald people. Half my family's bald, but you're not. So you might as well just drop out on looks alone and then acquiring a girlfriend like immediately before the race to prove to people maybe you're not gay or that you're, maybe you'll have a family and look more American and something. I don't know what he's trying to do, but we all know that his whole life is basically a charade. And Cory Booker, he keeps mentioning that we're one people and we all have the same ideals on stage and that we want to combat Donald Trump and that this should be more about our ideas and not tearing each other apart and comparing what we have to say as it pertains to defeating Donald Trump and not focusing too much on Trump, but just our ideals and not tearing too much into each other. That's what Cory Booker loves talking about. That's one of his things, which I guess makes sense. I mean, I guess I don't have anything wrong to say about that. He was looking out for his fellow opponents in the debate stage. So good for him. I apologize, got a little distracted in this episode, but yeah, so Cory Booker really contributed nothing. I think he's really in the pockets of Big Pharma and vice versa. So I don't really know what he said that was really relevant to anything in the debate other than we need to stop picking on each other, which who cares, man? You're there to magnify yourself. And maybe that was the way where he was going to separate himself and rise above everybody because that's like type of person he thinks he is, that he's better than everyone morally and that he's above everyone and he doesn't want everyone to fight. Well, I hate to break it to him in a debate. You need to have a vigorous battle of ideas. And if that means tearing into someone's character a little bit, it means tearing into someone's character a little bit. You need to do what you got to do because you got to separate the men from the boys and the fakes from the phonies and really project the message that will get somebody elected or at least get people fired up to the point of trusting you to be a leader of this country. So I don't know. I probably wouldn't have taken that route, kind of like Tulsi took the route of asking some of these people ahead of her what their views on certain things were in comparison to hers. I mean, that's just a strategy that's not going to work. You just got to hit stuff head on. You got to be passionate. You got to be fired up. And you speak the truth where you can. But that's why I'm not a huge politics guy, because if you speak too much of the truth, you're going to get thrown off the stage and you might be in that boycott position like Tulsi. So the final three people in this debate that I'll talk about, because I'm probably leaving somebody out, but if I am, they're irrelevant in my eyes because there was a lot going on in these debates. But the big ones and the people who caught the most questions were, of course, Joe Biden, former vice president, Elizabeth Warren, aka Pocahontas, and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, hilariously enough, coming off a heart attack last week, getting up on stage. I guess I'll give the guy props. I don't know whether to give him props or to think he's a lunatic. Because if I had a heart attack and I was in my upper 80s and I was running for president, I really stood on principle for a message, I probably would relinquish that message and, fold up the pup tent and be done. I mean, that's what I would do. And maybe I'm cynical, but if my life is on the line and I just had a heart attack, I know I'm not going to be fit for office for the long haul, let alone 4 years. I mean, there's no way I could last 8 in that capacity of commander-in-chief. So I guess props to him for being the ultimate hardo, the ultimate political guy, just getting up there and despite the heart attack, preaching his nonsense. So of those three people, it's important to keep in mind that all of them are old. They're all in their 70s. They're all white. None of this stuff matters from a libertarian angle, but that's just like what we're facing. So it always seems like in that party that preaches all these ideals of diversity and inclusion, it always turns into the older white people calling the shots. So I don't really know how that works. I'm not an organizational behavior guy, but it's just funny that it's how it works out in the Democratic Party because they're really just a bunch of hypocrites in that regard. Also hypocrites in that all three of them are very, very rich and that they hate the rich insofar as that they want to tax the living fuck out of them. To redistribute it, which basically means flush it down the toilet and trap people in a state of dependency. So the big thing here is Joe Biden distinguished himself from the other two as being a little bit less of a loony bird, I guess. I mean, Joe Biden of the three clearly has the lowest IQ. He's not very intelligent. And he puts his foot in his mouth. He has a lot of gaffes, but you could just tell he was tripping up there. Like he's tripping over small questions, over more loaded questions. He was forgetting what he was going to say mid-thought. Just like stuttering, stammering, and you could just tell it was not a good look for him. I'm surprised his dentures didn't fall out this time around, which would have been humorous. But he just looks like a skeleton in a mess, and he'll eventually succumb to Elizabeth Warren, the establishment's favorite in the polls at some point. So we'll see when he voluntarily gets out of the race, but it's going to be a long slog and a lot of dollars down the tubes for people to support him because a lot of people know he's moderate and he probably has a chance to beat Donald Trump, whereas the other people simply don't because they're too radical and out of control. At least for 2019, I'm sure in a few years they won't be, unless the economy, subsides or slips into some sort of recession where they can capitalize on Donald Trump's shortcomings with the economy and put themselves into office. But if the economy's fine, Trump is going to definitely win. But despite that little tangent I went on, Biden differentiated himself between the two because at least he had the audacity to say, well, who's going to pay for your Medicare for all, Bernie and Liz, considering that the CBO estimates that it would be north of $40 trillion to implement this program nationwide. And it's a perfectly legitimate and valid question for Joe Biden to ask. And they both sit there and they talk about, and I'm talking about Bernie and Liz. I don't know, again, where are they, how and why and where and when and who is going to pay for all of this? I just don't get it. Like we're going to print a shitload of money at the Federal Reserve and continue to devalue our currency and go further into debt and just push inflation north and cause these boom bust cycles because you can seize all of the money of every billionaire in the United States, all of it. And to Joe Biden's point, I don't know if this is accurate, but it's a good characterization. You could take all of their money, these billionaires, and that's enough to fund Medicare for all for a few months. So the idea of paying for it clearly is a question that's worthy of being asked. And that's where Joe Biden, the proverbial statesman and moderate, he kind of simply should win when he says something along those lines, but we're talking about leftists who are increasingly out of their mind who will drink any Kool-Aid they can when it comes in the form of free things. And Medicare for all is the shiniest object and the freest of all things. Outside of maybe Yang's freedom dividend. Absurd. I can't wait to devote an episode to explain how that would even work and how that would destroy the economy. And I don't know, that's just a bloodbath waiting to happen, which it never will happen, at least anytime soon, thank God. Because really, if you want to implement that, you want to get rid of the entire welfare state. It should supplant that. It should not be something in addition to the welfare state. But I'll, again, get off that topic. So Bernie and Liz, they talk about, I think Bernie even quoted immediately after the debate, and I think AOC tweeted as well, the same thing, tax the rich, tax the billionaires. Like, they have this obsession or this fetish with destroying jobs, opportunity, and capital investment. It's something that they're proud of, and they just don't understand the consequences of. And if they even did, I still don't think they care. I mean, Bernie just admittedly ignores economics, even though he doesn't understand it. While as AOC, she just doesn't understand it, and she's completely ignorant and really has grown up under a rock her entire life. And to think that she studied econ in college and got a degree in that is just a great depiction of what the higher education system is doing to people these days. That you study a subject, you get a degree in it, and you have no idea how the economy even works in your so-called economics major. But again, I digress. So it makes me think, like, when Joe and Bernie and Liz are up there, they're all friendly with each other while they have their disagreements. They're hugging each other. They're smiling. They're laughing. They're ever grateful for what they've done for each other in their careers, which basically means supporting them and creating massive bureaucracies, stealing people's money, overregulating the economy, and cutting off people's liberty. Like, they're revel in that. They're just so happy that they've done all of these things, and they've been buddy-buddy for 30, 40 years. And if they say something mean to each other, I'm sure at the cocktail hour after, they kind of say, oh, I'm sorry about that. At least maybe you'll have a cabinet position later on when one of us wins. So I don't know. There's a lot of like brouhaha and phony nonsense going on up there amongst those three, because ultimately one of them will be the establishment's picks. It's looking like it's going to be Liz Warren. I think the writing's been on the wall for that for a long, long time. I actually have a friend who's a native of Ohio, where I live, who's running the Liz Warren campaign in Iowa. So Liz Warren for Iowa is handling a lot of the rural districts out there and the barnstorming. And God bless his heart, he's supporting someone who really has no idea what she's talking about. So with Bernie and Liz on stage, for them, it's all about one-upsmanship, and they didn't really get a chance to do that in this debate. I think the New York Times and CNN framed it in a way where they wouldn't have to do that, where they're allowed to agree on some things and be less divisive. Hell, even maybe tear into Joe Biden a little bit and eliminate him from the stage in the future. But it's just going to be funny to see like a Donald Trump go toe-to-toe with a Liz Warren, where he can openly and admittedly call her Pocahontas, someone who like used her fake Native American background to get ahead in life. Whereas no one in the Democratic Party is going to go at those lengths to do something that would be considered racist or ethnically offensive. They're not going to just do those things, the funny things that Donald Trump will throw her way. So this is really just a bunch of softball questioning and responses from Bernie and Liz, and just a lot of destruction coming down the pike because the media is putting forth people like this who are economically illiterate, who have no morals, who are promoting straight up evil. And it's just weird. So collectively as a group, I don't see anything positive amongst any of this, despite what Tulsi Gabbard had to say about war and peace and foreign policy and getting out of the intervention nightmare that is Syria and the Middle East in totality. So that's what I've got. Next time, I'm going to be a little bit more focused on making sure there's no distractions during my podcast. But if you're a libertarian, this is just more an entertaining spin on what we see and what these people were talking about. Whereas maybe next podcast, I'll talk about the economics of certain things and certain proposals these people are putting forth. But for now, we need to put it to rest and realize that nobody on stage is advocating for the American people. No one is advocating for morals, for principles, for economics, for freedom, for liberty, for anything. Tulsi Gabbard hit the nail on the head with foreign policy. Outside of that, none of these people should be believed. They have their political agendas. They're obsessed with power. They're not trustworthy, and they're genuinely downright awful people. So I really appreciate you guys listening to me give my take on the Democratic debates here in Ohio last night. And that concludes episode 5. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.